Missed an episode of your favorite podcast? Choose from over a decade of content in our archives, not just the latest episode. All free at GCNlive.com.
This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Everyone all set, cocked, locked? Here we go. Your dial set correctly to USA Prepares. Thank you for being in class today. We broadcast 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains, right from the farm. Nathan is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. I'm Vincent Finelli. Rich Scheben is with us. Welcome, Rich Scheben.
Well, thank you, Mr. Finelli. How are you this morning?
I am really well, really well. Let me give out the number if you'd like to call in, 866-582-9933, 866-582-9933. Telephone listen line is up, 605-477-3249. 605-477-3249. Just one quick comment. The polls are open today, so if you're heading out to exercise your opinion on who will be selected to control your life, remember, never reelect anyone. Never reelect anyone. So let me say it a different way. If you're heading out to exercise your opinion on who will be selected to control your life, remember, never reelect anyone. Rich Scheben?
I agree.
Yeah.
You want me to just
and you know what? The
from
problem
here,
is...
Vince, I can certainly do that. I mean,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
all
please,
right,
please do.
I will take the cue. All right, awesome. Well, what we spoke privately last night, and one of the things I told Vince America is that I've been noticing that there's a lot of who/what as to identity politics, as what identity you are. How does a person identify himself? You know, you're reading articles about male pregnancies and transgender this and sexual orientation that and skin pigmentation this and gender this. And we all know that de Blasio, mayor of New York, says there's 51 different genders. I mean, I can go on and on and on. So I just create a little monologue. I'm going to try to get through it as quickly as possible. But it also talks about some observations, a little dab of philosophy. And I want to start with a quote that I've probably read about 10, 12 times over the past few years. And it's stated, "It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live." And that's from Marcus Aurelius. And if you don't know who that is, watch the movie The Gladiator. And that quote really says a lot because so many Americans and people around the world are wasting our time. We're destroying America and was too concerned about our hyphenated name or group. And if we could take that same amount of energy and putting it into making America better, instead of what gender that you are, what skin pigmentation, what sexual orientation, and stop this identity politics, which the whole term has been used to basically disguise the corruption that's taken place from the elite. And as we become hyphenated Americans, we continue to destroy our culture, our traditions, our heritage, and we get more concerned with the manufactured perception, ideology, and manufactured pity and guilt. And all this leads to this group identity politics, which lowers the bars of standards and expectations. And I'm sure for those of you who listen to this show, you've heard me talk about that in great detail, especially for getting a job and keeping a job. And when we care about words that have been hijacked by definition to use as a tool to divide the American people, like equality, fairness, tolerance, diversity, accountability, prosperity, inclusiveness, democracy, humanity. All these words basically mean nothing. They've literally been changed by definition, used by the elite and the talking heads, which are paid for by the elite, in order to confuse us. And this all leads to a decrease in value and appreciation of life, especially when people, through group identity politics, are getting jobs and keeping jobs. And just one of many examples I came up with, because I'm reading so much about this these days, and that is, it's a very sad topic, but it's suicides. I can't go one day without reading articles on suicides. In fact, I had a local lady, she was going to buy some goats from me, and I'm not going to get too specific, but the reason why she didn't come over to buy some goats is because a good friend of hers committed suicide. This was just yesterday, or the day before, I can't remember now. But, and this person was in their 40s. Now, regarding suicides, this is a very sad statistic that I read recently. 10-year-olds to 34-year-olds, suicide is the second leading cause of death in America. 10 to 34 years old, suicide, second leading cause of death in America. And for 50 and under, the number one cause of death is drug overdose, which I'm pretty sure has a very strong direct proportion to suicides. Now, in lieu of trying to identify as what group I'm in, I'm too busy living, folks. For those of you who have either read the book or heard me on the air, I'm losing a lot of strength in my arms and my grips because of spinal stenosis and nerve damage, and I'm in a big hurry to live every day that I can. And again, it's not to identify as a group, but I'm going to mention some of the things that I've lived for. I live for every day. I live for tomorrow. I live for the next season. I'm excited about everything. I grew up in the metropolitan area of New York City. I love dancing. I love going to the nightclubs. I remember driving all night and then going upstate without sleep and fishing the Beaverkill River many times. I don't care about college degrees, even though I got a few of them, and I've talked about that in much detail. I dream about outdoor adventures in my next one: hunting, fishing, botany, berry picking, mushroom picking, edible and medicinal plants, dendrology, ornithology, just the natural life, living off the land and nature. Of course, I did a over 20-year stint in corporate America. But freedom, liberty, time, health, variety, adventure, standing for principle, all require a balance in life. And I've given the definition many times of standing for principle. And one thing I'd like to do someday, Vince, is just talk about the ideas and solutions in specificity and detail, just for one show that I've come up with over the years. And instead of rewarding the overextended and the too big to fails and the too big to jails and the powerful, I try to use financial, economic, social, and political rationale equally. Everyone I know tries to strive for truth, common sense, logic, in order to stick up for the little guy who has no representation, no restitution, or no protection under the law. Now, when I talk about hunting or fishing, sometimes it gets some people's hackles up, but I want to make it very clear, even though I have plenty of taxidermy mounts in my cabin, I do not hunt for trophies. I hunt for meat. I'm a meat hunter. I try to utilize every portion of the animal that I harvest: horns, cape, hide, and, of course, the meat. I've always given away 50% of the meat. I've never accepted offers to hunt outside of North America. I'm not dissing people who do, because game needs to be managed. That's just the way it is, okay? But I personally have gotten offers to go to Africa hunting, and I've turned them down because I feel it's my obligation to bring the meat home and to take care of the meat on my own and distribute it to people locally and not give it to people around the world, because then it turns into just a trophy hunt. Now, there's certain things you can't eat, like wolves, grizzly bears, coyotes, things of that nature. And those are obviously exceptions to the rules. I personally don't fall for politically correct buzzwords or propaganda. which the elite try to change definitions of American words, and they use popular phrases like, it's for the kids, it's better for business, it's for the environment. Basically, it's for the elite control. It is for the addiction, the power, the corruption, the money, the control of these elite people. That's all it is. And I talk about practice what you preach laws often, but there's no concessions from the bought and paid for talking heads in the mainstream media, Congress/politicians, lawyers, judges, bankers. All they want to do is basically control the narrative and the manufacturing of the narrative in order to distract, dumb down, and divide the American people. So there's chaos and infighting between the groups, especially at the bottom 93%. Now, I've had conversations with many people where they say, oh, every generation says that. You know, when the older folks say, oh, things are getting bad, and I feel sorry for the kids, and they say every generation says that. Oh, really? Think about this. Think about the suicide rates, the debt that we're in. At every level, household, at every level of government, corporations, all the zombie companies and zombie banks out there where I've talked in great detail about it, the money for the elite, no savings, no middle class, the drug situation, opioids, meth, marijuana has 10 times the potency that it was back in the 60s. Low skill sets, no balance between technology and nature, low opportunity for high-paying jobs, and 90% of the college degrees are worthless. And I will finish this up after the break, folks. I appreciate you listening. And Vince, thank you for always allowing me to exercise my First Amendment rights.
Yeah, there you go. Rich Scheben, offgridmontana.com. Offgridmontana.com. We'll be right back. Live from Montana, Rich Scheben. Rich, please continue.
Well, thank you, sir. And I'm going to continue with this monologue, if you will. And thanks for listening in, America. And the importance of why it's so crucial to not talk about identity politics and your victim group status, your protectionist group status. And this is why the elite call it identity politics, because they want to disassociate with the group, or the word group, because that's exactly what it all means. What they've done is it's a divide and conquer strategy, and it's meant to eliminate hard work, effort, proof, results, and qualifications. So what we're going to be seeing, because of the fact that identity politics have turned into a religion, we're going to be seeing signs like default, delinquency, bankruptcies. It's going to be very, very bad with what's coming. And if Trump pulls a rabbit out of his hat with what he inherited, the sabotage that he inherited, it's going to truly be a miracle. But the math just doesn't show it. Not for the bottom 93%, just the elite few. And when you look at some of the things that they're trying to do, and just look at gun laws, the middle of June, we're in the middle of June right now. Chicago has over 1,000 shootings and more than 200 murders in the infamous gun-free zone city of Chicago. I hear the elite basically buying and paying the talking heads to talk about things that are absolutely ridiculous, like objectivity and meritocracy is a white myth. They're throwing around class envy like crazy, and I've talked about 1,000,000 times about stock buybacks and QE, quantitative easing, basically going to the top 95%. Or it's absolutely ridiculous, some of the things that's going on, and that the American people are allowing this to happen. Some specific examples are cheerleading, beauty pageants, and I'm going to use a term given by one of the pageant directors, where they are now going to allow fatties. That was the word that she used. Trans boys competing against girls in sports. Basically, this is all leads to lowering the bars of standards and expectations in America. And basically, it goes even further than that. It's meant to break your will and make you submissive. And if you are not exercising your right in the Second Amendment and saying it like it is, then you are part of the globalist dream and American nightmare. So, in conclusion, I've talked about standing for principle, QE for the people, self-sufficiency, preparedness schools, practice what you preach laws, and practice, I can go into I can do a whole show just on those with specificity and detail. But we are basically losing our control of our destiny by, for, and of the people. We need to protect the little guy. So that's who I am. That's what I'm trying to do right now, America, is stick up for the little guy who has no protection under the law. And I'm going to talk about practice what you preach laws for just a few seconds. I'll use gun protection laws as an example. Aren't you tired of the words hypocrisy and double standards? Or the phrases, that's the way it is, it'll never change. Basically, those are the people who are poster boys or girls for ignorance, apathy, and indifference. Because if we allow the elite and their people to be able to protect themselves with guns, and we can't, it goes well beyond hypocrisy and double standards. We need practice with the preach laws, at every level. And the carbon footprint, the global warming thing, all these elites living in these big 5,000, 10,000 square foot homes, multiple homes around the world, flying with jets, which contributes more to the carbon footprint than anything else. And they're talking about taxing cows for farting. Come on, folks. It's gotten to the point where it's been ridiculous. It's time for all of us to unite, for the little people to stick up for common sense and logic and control our own destiny. Vince, I want to thank you very much for allowing me to say this, and we'll see you after the break, folks.
Rich Sheben's with us. Rich, is a guy who was the vice president of the United States of America Corporation, and the former vice president. His name was Joe Biden. Many people might remember him as Jumpin' Joe Biden. And he wasn't known for the high jump. He wasn't known for hurdling, the foot race, where you leap over hurdles. He wasn't known for the long jump. And he wasn't known for pole vaulting. But he was known as Jumpin' Joe because he would change which side he was on, and many believe that it was, who was paying him off or threatening him. So depending on who was threatening him or bribing him, he would change his mind as to which side of the issue he was on. So he was known as Jumpin' Joe Biden. Now, Jumpin' Joe was also known as a plagiarist. Now, if you don't believe me, all you have to do, class, is type in Joe Biden. You don't have to put the jumping part in. Just Joe Biden, comma, plagiarism in your favorite search engine. You'll see that, he admitted that he borrowed some of other people's work and used it as his own without references. So that's Jumpin' Joe Biden. Now, sometimes they say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, and we're talking about genetics, right? So in the Biden family, there's a gal, and her name is Caroline. Caroline is 31, Caroline Biden. Now, Caroline Biden is a pretty gal, long blonde hair, and she appears to be a millennial. She seems to, there are images of her on the internet, and I'll post it on the website, usaprepares.com. And so there's Caroline, and this poor gal, all she wanted to do was buy this thing for whatever it was. I'm not sure what it was, for about a little over $600. So she borrowed a credit card, and the next thing you know, she's using that credit card to leverage, and this is my opinion, purchases of over $110,000 at a pharmacy. Now, I'm not sure how you do that. I'm not sure how you can go into a pharmacy and say, what do you got for $110,000? I'll take it all. I mean, I don't know how you do that, but this 31-year-old gal who's pouting and she's got her arms crossed and she looks like an angry millennial, that's my opinion, was arrested for this scheme, and I'm just going to read the headlines. This is dailymail.co.uk. Joe Biden's glamorous niece appears in court sporting a pair of funky $1,450 Givenchy booties, which are my words here now. They're multicolored booties. And you go back to the quote. She faces charges for a $100,000 credit card scam. Caroline Biden, 31, was arrested last year for using someone's credit card to buy $110,000 worth of items at Bigelow Pharmacy in Manhattan. Bigelow Pharmacy. So on Monday, she was supposed to be sentenced to 2 years of probation as part of a plea deal she took in 2017. Now, we'll talk about larceny, grand larceny, petty larceny in just a minute. But so she was supposed to be sentenced to 2 years probation. That means you don't do any penance for your crime, right? You just probation. She got away with it, right? So it looks like she's the daughter of financier. That would be a money guy, a financier, James Biden Sr., who's Jumpin' Joe Biden's brother. Now, how is it possible that someone involved in larceny, now that would be grand larceny. Let me say what petty larceny is. Now, according to the internet, the lowest level of theft is considered petty larceny or petite larceny, P-E-T-I-T, larceny, or petty theft. It's the unlawful taking of property that's valued at $50 or less. Now, in New York, it's $1,000 or less. Over $1,000 is grand larceny. So there's two kinds of larceny, petty and grand. Grand being, the most egregious. So do you go to jail for petty larceny? Sure. Do you go to jail for grand larceny? Sure. Okay. Well, this gal probably, I don't know if it's because of her looks or her Givenchy booties, seems to be getting away with it. Maybe it's because of her lineage. Maybe it's because of her genetic connection to Jumpin' Joe Biden, the plagiarist, the former vice president of CEO USA.
Bingo.
Maybe it's and that's why I'm saying this, Rich Scheben, because you've been talking about two classes. Now, anybody else, you take a black guy in the inner city, and if he steals like 4 candy bars, he's going to the clink, right? He's going to the clink. A white guy, probably the same thing, okay? Any color, probably the same thing, but not the elite, not the rulers, or their relatives, or their blood descendants. So here we have this gal who has pleaded her way to probation. Absolutely an outrage. And how is that possible that there in our face, the exact scenario that you've been talking about, two standards. They get away with it, we don't. Now, how stupid do you have to be to charge $110,000 worth of stuff at a New York pharmacy? How can you do that? It seems like, okay, so here's the history of C.O. Bigelow. It's an apothecary. Nestled in the tiny neighborhood of Greenwich Village in New York City, C.O. Bigelow is the oldest apothecary in America. For nearly 2 centuries, I'm reading their website, we have served some of the country's most predominant personalities and remain true to our traditions, transport our customers back to a time and place of personalized attention, customized formulas, and healing and therapeutic natural preparations. That's who they are. They are at 102 6th Avenue, New York City. So that's Bigelow. Now, how is it possible to spend over $110,000 there? I don't know. I wouldn't be able to do it. If you challenged me and said, "Okay, Vinny, we're gonna reward you with something that you think is pretty nice," all you have to do is figure out how to spend $110,000 at Bigelow Pharmacy. I'd say, well, why don't we just forget the whole thing right now? Because I don't know how I could possibly do that. So there you have it. Jumpin' Joe Biden, who also said that he played football. And there's another story in the Huffington Post that says, here's the headlines, Vice President Joe Biden caught in a lie about playing football. And they say, well, he's never played, maybe flag football, but he's never played on a college team, where he was in any competition. There's jumping Joe Biden. So what are we finding out about these people who are telling us what to do, have been selected for our polling pleasure? Well, they lie. They lie. I mean, you've heard the old adage, how can you tell if a politician's lying? His lips are moving. I mean, we've all heard that, right? Well, there's a lot of truth to that. So jumping Joe Biden's niece, arrested, but looks like she's going to get away with it. Maybe it's because, she's wearing a short skirt. Maybe it's because she's blonde. Maybe it's because she's related to Jumpin' Joe. Maybe it's because people's arms were twisted, saying, she wouldn't do well in prison. She's a millennial. She pouts. She crosses her arms. She doesn't take direction well. And there she is, in the getting ready for her court appearance. And what does she have in her hand? Her cell phone. She's holding her cell phone. The same kind of image you see of these Hollywood actors and actresses who have their cell phones everywhere they go. But there you have it. Jumping Joe Biden's niece. It should be a national story everywhere about how the other team, the one that tells us what to do, the one that rules over us, the one that taxes us into oblivion, get away with grand larceny, theft. It's an outrage. Rich Scheben, your thoughts?
Well, I will counter that with this article that's about 2 weeks old. Biden, GOP under Trump, has abandoned American values for phony populism and fake nationalism. See, this is why I can throw out the word hypocrisy and double standards all day long. But I guess he means American values is that the elite can steal from the poor, because that's what's been happening. Just look at the last recession. It hasn't been fixed. The Great Recession, what a bunch of crap. This improvement in growing economy is a bunch of crap. Basically, the elite has been stealing from the little guy for the past 10 years. And this so-called fake, phony manufactured bull market, that's why I like to talk about QE and quantitative easing. 95% of the money printed goes to the top 1 to 7%, mostly the top 1 to 2%. Let me say that again. I want every American to be able to know this. For all the money printing that they disguise in certain words, whether it's Operation Twist, whether it's quantitative easing, whether it's some Martian term, it doesn't matter. 95% of the money printed goes to the top 1 to 7%, and mostly the top 1 to 2%. So Joe Biden apparently feels that American values is the elite stealing from the poor. And I know we're going to a break pretty soon, but I think we should just talk about Apple stock for a minute. I think we talked about that last night, just to confirm the stock buyback program, and so the people can see how fake and phony everything is in America, especially in the world of economics. Vince?
Okay, let's talk about Apple. Let's talk about how big this buyback is.
Okay, there is an article on June 5th, and it's titled Apple Stock Rises to New Highs. And there should be a big ha, 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 some type of laughter icon for the next part of this after the comma, but it's still inexpensive. They can basically manufacture any price to whatever they want. And I'll talk in more detail and specificity after the break. I hear the music.
Yeah.
But just to wet your whistle, they bought $23.5 billion in stock buybacks. And I'll talk about that after the break.
Okay. Offgridmontana.com. Rich, do you have another topic that you'd like to bring up in this segment?
Well, I wouldn't mind finishing up what I was talking about regarding stock buybacks, but if you have
please
something
do.
else you want to... Okay.
No. Well, let's do that, and then when we come back, I'd like to talk about treason. I'd like to talk about treason at the after the top of the hour break.
Yeah, let's throw in a little sedition and espionage in there too. But to finish up what I was saying, folks, Apple stock buybacks, $23.5 billion with a B, record amount. Okay, now this is what, if I had to label this with anything, I would label this called zero foresight financial fraud. Basically, this record amount of buybacks can build several border walls. And what they're doing is they're paying their preferred stockholders high dividend payouts. The amount Apple spent backing its own shares exceeded the stock market value of most companies in the S&P 500. The first quarter of 2018 was the biggest quarter on record for buybacks of $242 billion, and that's what they admit. So this is not just tax breaks from the 35% category to the 21%, but they're borrowing money means they're going into debt more, and the taxpayers are going to probably be on the hook for it, because when the taxpayers go broke, they don't get the bailouts. They don't get the too big to fails and too big to jails and the reimbursements from the people. Okay? And this creates more cost shifting, et cetera. So when you look at all this, look at the S&P alone. They're expected to buy back this year $800 billion of their own stocks for the dividend, stock options, and to the executives, merger and acquisitions, which means less workers, more robotics, artificial intelligence, and automation. What artificial manufacturing does to inflation, or artificial manufacturing of inflation, it's creating debt, asset, and credit bubbles, and the implosion could send us into the biggest depression ever. The money printing, the quantitative easing, whatever they call it, which hasn't really stopped, has not achieved real growth. It's strictly meant to feather the nest of the elite. So when they create more money, it destroys the currency value and destroys the purchasing power of the little guy. Share buybacks, dividends for the wealthy stockholders. We all know that 1% of the people own 83% of the stock, 10% own 96%, and in the form of executive cash and stock options. The people need to know this. This is why I talk about QE for the people. I talk about quantitative easing for the people, and I have about a 10-point plan. I've mentioned it on the air many times. I will do it again one of these days. This is what we need to all think about, folks. We need to identify as Americans, and that's why I gave that monologue, because the corruption, the manipulation, the deception, the nepotism, and Joe Biden was a great example that Vince gave. We can no longer control our own destiny through hard work, effort, proven results, and qualifications. We have to come together. We have to forget about identity politics, because all it does is lower the bars of standards and expectations for getting a job, and that philosophy, that ideology of lowering the bars of standards and expectations metastasizes like a cancer throughout all of our traditions and heritage and culture in America. And it's not making us great. It's destroying American exceptionalism, and this is why suicides are up, and value and appreciation for everything, especially getting a job, is an all-time low. Vincent?
You know, I just was thinking about some of my formal education, you know, that education where they say that you're certified, that you've been in class and you've taken some exams and you're proficient in what we've trained you in. And so my education in finance and economics was 40 years ago. Got my undergraduate Bachelor of Science in Finance and Economics in 1976. I completed my master's by 1978. So 40 years ago. And I got to tell you, stock buybacks were uncommon 40 years ago. But now, this practice has escalated. And some say it's grown to exceed dividend payments in some years. Although she would rather I didn't say it live on the radio. You're listening to Sonny Skidmore's favorite radio broadcast. Sonny Skidmore is the owner of KLID AM 1340, Poplar Bluff, Missouri. Sonny Skidmore, thanks so much for carrying this broadcast on KLID AM 1340. Rich Scheben, we were talking about, I mentioned the word traitor, treason, in the last hour. So I looked up the word traitor, and that's a person who betrays a friend, a country, a principle, etc. That's what the internet says the word traitor means. And then I looked at the word treason. Treason is the crime of betraying one's country. The crime of betraying one's country, especially by attempting to kill the sovereign or overthrow the government. And some of the synonyms for the word treason are treachery, disloyalty, betrayal, faithlessness. Remember the word disloyal, okay? Okay. So we've got this gal. Her name is Kathy Griffin. So she alleges to be a comedian. It's hard to imagine. But that's what she professes to be. And she is the gal who held up an image of a severed head of Donald J. Trump, covered in blood. Rich, were you going to say something?
No, I was just clearing my throat. Please continue.
Oh, okay. So she's this middle-aged gal alleging to be a comedian who held up an image of a bloody, gory, severed head. A replica, if you will, of Donald Trump's decapitated head. So according to a website called EW.com, it says, Kathy Griffin apologized for the gory image she created with photographer Tyler Shields depicting her holding a facsimile of Donald Trump's decapitated head. Quote, I sincerely apologize, end quote, she said in a video to social media. She said, I'm just now seeing the reaction of these images. I went way too far. The image is too disturbing. I understand how it offends people. It wasn't funny. I get it. That's what she said, end quote, right? So that's Griffin, Kathy Griffin, and she paid a mild price. She should have been prevented from ever appearing in public since then. For, what would you call that? I guess betraying, being a traitor, committing treason, disloyalty, okay? With this image of Donald Trump. Now, some people would say, oh, it's just a joke. Well, to me, it wasn't funny. Now, I remember presidents in my life whose names were John Fitzgerald Kennedy, Lyndon Baines Johnson, Richard Milhous Nixon, Gerald Ford, and I met Gerald Ford in person, spent about, 15, 20 minutes with him. James Earl Carter, Ronald Reagan, George Herbert Walker Bush, William Jefferson Blythe Clinton, George Walker Bush, and Barack Hussein Obama. Those are recent presidents. I don't remember anybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, who held up a severed head of any of those men. I don't ever remember someone doing something as vile as that and getting away with it. Now, would you call that disloyalty, treachery, betrayal? Those are synonyms for the word treason. So that's Kathy Griffin, the alleged comedian. Then you get down to a guy who does something vile at the Tony Awards, the recent Tony Awards. They just had the 72nd one held in Radio City Music Hall in New York on June 10th. Now, the Tony Awards are an event organized to recognize the achievements on Broadway productions. You know, who's great on stage. Well, Robert De Niro was on stage, and he is alleged to be one of the greatest actors of all time. So what's an actor? Well, that'd be like a scriptreader, right? That'd be like someone who play acts. That'd be someone who's an impersonator, right? Not the guy who's real. I mean, you know, an actor might play an Albert Einstein. That doesn't mean he's Albert Einstein. That doesn't mean he knows about the theory of relativity or can explain it or can explain any physics at all. These are impersonators, script readers, play actors. So Robert De Niro is, you know, alleged to be one of the greatest actors of all time. By the way, this is all my opinion, and I'm allowed to have an opinion. So, during his appearance at the Tony Awards, and I can't use this language, and I don't use this language, and this language is not acceptable in our house, whether by a guest or our family. Nobody speaks like this in our house. It's vile, it's vulgar, it's unacceptable, it's not necessary, it's improper, it's wrong. So he used the F word. And I'm going to make this so I'm not going to say it, but I'm going to let you know what his message was. So he said, F Trump, quote unquote. It's no longer down with Trump. It's F Trump. That's what he said. So let me say it again. His quote, beginning of the quote, F Trump. Continuing the quote, it's no longer down with Trump. It's F Trump, end quote. That's according to CNN.com. That's Robert De Niro. Now, some people might say that's treason. Some people might say he's a traitor. I'd have to agree with him. And what does he get for saying that? A standing ovation. People have lost their minds. They've absolutely lost their minds. And so if you wonder why we're in such a mess, it's because people say, wow, was that great or what? That was awesome. De Niro, he's my hero. He's an actor. He's not the guy that does it. He's the guy that plays the guy that does it. He's an impersonator. He's my hero. Boy, I love that guy. I'll bet his family is something that I'd want to emulate. Robert De Niro, play actor, script reader, impersonator, says that about the President of the United States. Whether you like him or not, it's wrong. Now, I didn't like a number of the presidents, the CEOs of corporate USA, whom I mentioned in that list, like Barack Hussein Obama. I didn't like him at all. I thought he was a serial liar. I didn't like George Walker Bush, George W. Jr. I thought he was a bumbling guy. I certainly didn't like William Jefferson Blythe Clinton. Pretty frustrating to me. Pretty frustrating. I certainly didn't like Junior's dad, George Herbert Walker Bush. I didn't like him either as a president. He might have been a nice guy to go skydiving with, if you're interested in that. But are we talking about treason? I think we're talking about treason. I think we're talking about people who are traitors. It's unacceptable. And why aren't they arrested? Why hasn't the Secret Service gone over to De Niro's house and said, hey, Robert, I love your impersonations. By the way, you said some things against the president which might incite people to do some bad things, like attack the president. We don't like that. It's not nice. How would you like it if people did that to you and said those things about you, Robert De Niro? Do you think maybe some deranged person might say, you know what? I think I heard that, De Niro's not a nice guy and maybe he should be, and I won't say the rest. I'm appalled. I'm appalled that the media allowed it. I'm appalled that Radio City Music Hall allowed it. I'm appalled that they didn't cut the mic. Whatever happened to the hook? When you're on stage, this hook comes out from the side curtain and it goes around your neck and it pulls you off stage for doing something wrong. Whatever happened to the hook?
That's a good one.
I'm angry. It's wrong. It's morally wrong. It's unacceptable. And yet it continues day after day after day. We can talk about the gal who is making tent fashions noteworthy, Roseanne Barr, grabbing her crotch, singing the national anthem, Roseanne Barr, This is, and people like watching these stupid television shows with these impersonators. They're not people you'd want to emulate. They really aren't. And why is this happening? Well, there's an article in the Times, thetimes.co.uk. Dumb and Dumber, why we're getting less intelligent. And we are. So I expressed a little bit of anger during the last segment. I was talking about an actor, an alleged actor, and an alleged comedian who've done some disgraceful things. And you've got to ask yourself, how is it possible? How is it possible that we have sunk so low as to someone getting up on stage in front of a lot of people and going into a profanity-laced tirade? How is that possible? And worse than that, how is it possible that that person would get an applause? Like, yay, yeah, what, awesome, wow. How's that possible? So, there's an article in the times.co.uk that says the IQs or scores of young people has fallen steadily since World War II. And allegedly, this is the first authoritative study on this phenomenon, the decline to at least 7 IQ points. That's 7%. We've gotten stupider by 7%. Well, I would say that would that would be a miracle if we have only fallen by 7%. I think we've gotten pretty close to being as dumb as a box of rocks. You just look around. You know, you go to any store and you say, do you have a... And they go, what is that? They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know why you're there. They don't even know why they're there. I'm talking about the employees at a store, big box stores. So scientists are saying that the deterioration could be due to changes in the way math and language are taught. Okay. I think a big piece of this is because of the way information is being consumed. Well, heck, you don't have to read from books anymore. You can read it from an electronic tablet. I don't think it works as well, because I have trouble thinking about how would I write my notes in the margin in an electronic tablet. Some people read by listening to audiobooks. I got to tell you that I don't think there is any way of getting the information into your brain and having it stick better than through reading or by doing. Okay? The electronic screen, you know, how many people can remember what they read really well on an electronic screen as compared to a book with paper pages and ink? So we've got these young people who don't know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, estimate. They can't give you directions to how to get from where you are, where they are, to where you're trying to go, even though they've been there many times all their life. They can't explain it. They need the electron to help them, meaning a cell phone. So how far is it, young man, to get from here to there? They'll look down at their phone because they can't tell you in words. They'll say, well, let me look it up. They don't know what words mean. They don't know how to react. They melt down at the slightest stress. That's where we are. And we're allowing it, which is a disgrace. Rich?
Well, I'll address a couple things what you said. First of all, as far as memory, people need to read or see or hear something 3 to 10 times to have a chance to remember. That's been out there for quite a long time. And we've lowered our bars of standards and expectations so low, especially in learning institutions. And this is by design. And this is why we need to change the whole education system and have people teach who have been successful in private sector business for at least 15 years instead of hiring people straight out of college to be teachers. We need to change the whole plan of action there. And you went on a nice little rant about the double standards, and we talked about the Roseanne article last week, being that the left has double standards, and it's pretty obvious that actors are paid liars. I mean, that's why a lot of people, there's certain deals and handshakes in the back room, you know, whether it be on a casting couch with Harvey Weinstein or you know, you make me famous, I'll do favors for you type thing. Who knows what goes on behind closed doors? No one ever does. But a lot of these actors, a lot of these athletes, a lot of these entertainers and singers, they have been bought and paid for under the table, and they're going to be used by the elite to basically conform public opinion and make people buy at the company store. Vince?
I'd love to say what's on my mind, but I can't. Kurt Sheben's with us, offgridmontana.com. Calling in, probably above 55 miles an hour, is truck driver Jay in Illinois. Welcome, Truck Driver Jay.
Hey, good morning, Vince. Yeah, I'm doing about 65. Yeah, you're talking about audiobooks. Now, me personally, I love audiobooks. I am a voracious devouring of audiobooks. I will listen to probably 30, 35 audiobooks a year, and I learn a lot from audiobooks. And it actually depends on what it is you're listening to. Are you listening to a romance novel, or are you listening to USA Prepares? Right?
Well, Truck Driver Jay, I've got to agree with you. There are times when I will listen to an audiobook, and when you're driving, I certainly don't want you turning the pages of a hardbound book or a softcover book,
right?
Because obviously that's not safe. And when I'm in a tractor, I will listen to something about science. I'll put one earbud in, not two, one, and because I need to hear what's going on around me. That's when I'm going round and round and round and round in circles. When I bale hay, I can see clearly in front of me. I can see that I'm not going to run over animals. I'm sitting high in the cab of the tractor. I can do that. However, with a point I was trying to make, and I think Rich was as well, is that you learn better if you read it rather than if you hear it. And here's the test. So a lot of people watch television. So after that 1 hour long program is over, you walk in the room and you go, hey, so here's your final exam. What was the plot of that story? What was it about? What happened? Exactly what happened?
I don't know.
That's the point. That's the point. But if you read a book, you see the words. Sometimes your fingers go over the words. Sometimes you say, I don't think I quite understood that. Let me go back to that sentence or that paragraph, or let me reread it. Those kinds of things. That's what happens when you read a book, at least with me. Now, I did go to Evelyn Wood's Reading Dynamics back in the 60s, and I was typically reading around 200 words a minute when I started. When I was done, I was, with pretty good comprehension. When I was done, I was reading 2,000 words a minute with zero comprehension. Well, wait, zero comprehension.
Right.
I mean, I read the words, but they didn't stick. All right. So, eventually I was able to read faster, but, what I'm saying is if you read slowly, I believe your comprehension is better. So there's a trade-off. Bottom line is I have a feeling you agree with Rich and me that, you really do have more comprehension when you read a book rather than if you listen to someone else read the book. Is that right?
Yeah. But that also raises the question, well, what about talk radio? Are we learning anything from talk radio?
I don't know. And I'll tell you what. Rich, I'm so glad you brought that up. Rich Scheben and I have been talking about, we think, and we may be confused, and it's entirely possible that Rich Scheben and I are confused. And Rich, you can jump in if you think I'm saying something that's not correct. But we think that we live a lifestyle that's pretty darn cool. We live on a farm. Everything is a project. Everything needs improvement. Everything could be better. And it's an unending adventure with a long list of things to do. Okay? Some of them are more important than others. But I'm never bored. I'm exhausted, but I'm never bored. There are more things that I would like to get done than I can accomplish. And I have a feeling it's the same with Rich Scheben. Now, we think that's kind of a cool thing, to never be bored. I would consider that I'm on a permanent vacation. I do exactly what I want to do when I want to do it, and hardly anybody tells me what to do. Even I'm looking at a USDA 2017 census, where it's like, I don't know how many reminders they've sent me, but it tells me I'm overdue in red letters, return within 10 days, your response is required by law, and I go, I don't think so. I'm not going to do that. Yeah. So, I really don't do things that I don't want to do. Well, why is it that we've been talking about this kind of thing for 7 years, at least I have, and so few people have said, you know what, that's right, that really is cool. I should pay less taxes. I could handle a tractor. I could buy a small farm. I could raise some cows. I could get out of the rat race. I could live longer. I could do so many things. Plant that garden. I could build a solar system and get off grid. I could be independent. And I'm wondering why it is why so few people have joined us. You know, they listen to us, but have they really done it? And I've got to tell you, I only know one guy who came to the meetups and came for years and years, and he bought a farm. One guy out of 7 years worth of, we'll call it work, of us teaching. One guy. So, I don't know, Jay.
Okay.
I'd love to say, they even wrote an article in a magazine called 417 Magazine. It had a few of our instructors in it. 417 is the area code here in the greater Springfield, Missouri area. And they even quote me as saying, I'd love to say, a lot of people have followed our line of thinking, have followed our example, have joined in, but I can't say that that's true because they haven't. So talk radio, maybe that's all it is. Maybe it's just talk. Your thoughts,
well, Vincent,
Jay?
If I may chime in, I'll tell you that's one of the reasons I talk about Economic 101, and I do a lot of it, and I try to equally give as much merit to financial, social, and political rationale as well, as you know. But 78% of Americans are tapped out. 60% don't have $1,000 in savings. So the great majority, and I mean the great majority of Americans, are broke. They are literally tapped out. And that's one of the reasons why we talk about getting like-minded people together, so we can try to give them an opportunity to think outside the box. But let me discuss what you were talking about treason, because I didn't get to comment on that. And we were talking about the double standards and hypocrisies, which words that I hate, and that's why I talk about practice which are priest laws. But look at Black Lives Matter, Antifa, Southern Poverty Law Center, the Soros funding Rockefeller Rothschilds, the NGOs. Look at the treason. How about Zuckerberg selling how many millions of people's information to corporations and to China? The Clintons. How about Loretta Lynch meeting Bill Clinton on the tarmac? How about the fact that she said we need more marches, blood, and death on the streets? And this is why I always come back to my three criteria of standing for principle. And that is the same rules, laws, and accountability for everybody, truth, and if they do it, you do it. In other words, if they have less consequences for their behavior, that means everybody can do it too. The only way we're going to wake people up is by doing the same thing that they do, depending on what group. If they're going to try to get benefits based on what group they're in, basically victim group status, that they call identity politics, and they have different rules, laws, and accountability for race, gender, sex, religion, ideology, and continue the race baiting, and especially have a different set of rules, laws, and accountability based on what aristocracy they're in versus the serfdom. That needs to be unacceptable. We need to do the same thing that they do, or disallow them to do that. If they want to get rid of guns, then the Oscars and the Emmys and all these big Hollywood parties and get-togethers, they are no longer allowed to have guns on the premises. So this is the way we have to do it. And the only way to give the little guy a chance or a shot is by doing what we're doing on the radio. And I've gotten lots of information from talk radio on many different stations, especially including USAPrepares.com. I've given 90% of the information that I give in talks and on radio shows comes from what I read online and what I hear on talk radio. And I try to verify and research every iota of it. But the reason why I like reading from a book like you were talking about, Vince and Jay, is the fact that I can if I'm listening to a podcast, I can stop it and I can write down something important that I hear. If I'm reading from a book, I can obviously write it down in my notes in the context of how it should be delivered. So I think that's the only way to learn. And I think a lot of people are waking up. I think it's not just the fact that Trump was elected, but I think a lot of people are waking up to the corruption, the manipulation, the deception, the nepotism. And this is why there's so much despair out there at the same time, because people are broke and they're tapped out and they don't know where to go. And this is why we're trying to concentrate on helping the little guy, because the little guy does not have representation. This is why I'm on this show. I'll be honest with you. I don't do this for fame. I don't do this for money. I don't do this for because I want to be liked. I don't care about any of that. I do this for the American people, because that's what Americans should do. We should try to give information, advice, suggestion, ideas, and solutions to try to help the little guy. And the little guy, by my definition, is the bottom 93% who have lost pretty much everything. That's why I do this. And I know that's why you do this, Vince.
Yeah.
And pardon me for being a little long-winded there, but that is what it's all about at this point in my life with the demographic, Keynesian economics, corrupt central bank policies, and identity group politics that we live with every day.
Truck driver Jay, when we come back after this commercial break, would you mind telling us, based on your observations as you travel across the country, do you think we're headed toward a revolution? Do you think that people have had it?
Okay.
Yeah. Let's tell us what your thoughts are when we come back in just a few minutes. Truck driver Jay, you're doing about 60 miles an hour in Illinois. You meet a lot of people. 74, okay. You meet a lot of people. Do you think we're headed toward a revolution? And by revolution, I don't mean village against village. I mean villages against the government.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And the only reason I say that is just because people are starting to get tired. Okay, you got the story of how to boil a frog. You throw him in a hot boiling pot of water, he just jumps out. But you raise that water very slowly, you cook it. And people have become dumb. That's the only way I could put it. They just become dumb, and they're starting to get their rights taken away little by little by little, with, by the incrementalism. And there's a lot of people that are starting to wake up and say, hey, we don't like this. I mean, even Russia has had protests and stuff where people just are not happy with the way the government's going. It's coming. It's not going to be the way that people think it's going to be, but it is coming.
Mrs. Finelli and I had decided to watch something on Netflix, and it's about people buying homes, leaving England and looking towards Spain, Germany, Austria, Italy. And, I've been watching this with her, and here's something that we've noticed. They say, well, if you look, you don't see very many electrical receptacles in any of the houses in England, Spain, Germany, Austria. You don't see them. They're very few. And you hear people say on this broadcast that, you have to have an electrician do that work. It has to be, licensed, certified by the state. Really? That's ridiculous. Okay? So here we have the result of what happens when you have all the suppression. And the people who want to move out of England want to move there, move to other locations, and they're looking for what? What is really important to them? Views. They want a nice view from their house. Now, to me, that's pretty darn odd. I would want structure. I would want freedom. I would want space. I would want something that's going to last a long time. I would want affordability in operation of that property, meaning, high efficiencies in every respect. I would want to have water that is, I'm sure is going to be there year after year after year, decade, generation after generation. Clean air. Those are the things that are important to me. But according to these people on this television broadcast, they're interested in views. They don't talk about, well, let's look behind this wall and see how it's made. Let's see how strong it is. It's foreign to me. And that just goes back to we're getting dumber by the minute. I really believe we are. And I think that kind of ties into what you're saying. But yet, at the same time, people are annoyed with the oppression. Rich Scheben?
Yeah.
Rich, do you have a comment?
Oh, can you hear me now, Vince?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, and this is one of the reasons why I make it very clear that the only way we're going to change things is from the bottom up. And people have to realize that we've been played, we've been duped, and in fact, we've been used. If we're still playing the hyphenated group identity politics game, we are not going to learn how to be Americans. We are not going to learn synergy. And we have to come up with ideas and solutions that's going to help the little people, the masses.
So when somebody asks Vinny, so what are you? I go, what do you mean? Well, what are you? You mean, do I have a job? No, I don't have a job. What are you? You mean like a farmer? Yeah, I'm a farmer. Well, what are you? And I think they're asking me, what is my nationality? And I'd have to say, well, I'm an American. I'm an American. I'm not a hyphenated American. I'm not a black American, yellow American, red American, white American. I'm an American. Truck Driver Jay, thanks so much for being with us and dispensing.